So, share my screen. All right, guys. So before we get into it, GL was asking about my glasses. So these are actually my shooting glasses. Okay. And they're different than my blue blockers. And when I started putting these on, I just started feeling better because where blue blockers block the blue light coming in, these just made everything yellow and bright. So people, I would start, I was wearing them to different functions and people would ask me, what are you doing? Why are you wearing those glasses? And I said, it makes me feel better. I said, I know there's got to be some kind of science behind it. So I started looking into it. And it's basically chronotherapy. Okay. It's just like if you had different colored walls in your room, it's going to affect your mood. So I found this company that I bought 10 different pairs of different colors and they all have a different effect on your mood. So depending what I'm aiming for, like I really like the blue ones, the red ones are cool, the purple, so that's the deal with the glasses. Now, tonight, some of you have seen some of this stuff, but keep your mind open, ask questions. You might connect the dots in a different way. We're going to go over fasting. I'm going to make it simple for you all. And I'm going to start doing more of these lessons just open to everybody, whether it's on mindset fasting or whatever I feel like the topic of the day is. So let me give you a little background. This was the last time I competed in 2014. Prior to that, in 2012, I had a very bad knee injury, ruptured my patellar tendon, my left patellar tendon, snapped about 4 or 5 other ligaments. The IT band snapped in half. It was a really bad injury. Normally when a tendon snaps, it comes off the bone. Mine snapped into 4 pieces. With that being said, in 2012, I decided I'm going to compete again because Devin had never seen me compete. Devin's my wife, for those of you that don't know. And so I'm going to use this as a comeback to come back from this injury that, the doctor said, man, you're not going to be able to do this X, Y, and Z and all that. So I start getting ready for the show in 2014. And I'm researching about 8 weeks out from the show, always studying fat loss stuff. Okay, how can I really get to the leanest I've ever been? I really want to make Devin proud and I want to be my best because I don't know if I'm going to compete again. It had been 6 years since I had competed. The last time was 2008. And we have different types of what I come across in my research, fat cell receptors called alpha receptors. And men typically, and these are your stubborn fat areas. In men, that's typically your belly area, love handles, lower back. Women, it's typically glutes and thighs. It can vary. You'll see reverse patterns. You'll see men that have female dominant patterns and vice versa. But anyway, what makes those fat cells stubborn is that those type of receptors have a very poor blood supply. Now, if you look at how fat loss happens, the first step is mobilization. You have to be able to get blood in there to mobilize the fat and then transport it out to be utilized as energy. If you have a very poor blood supply to an area, you can't even kickstart the fat loss process. One of the only ways that you can do this effectively and consistently is fasting. That's how I came upon fasting. It had nothing to do with health. It had to do with cosmetics, trying to really get, in bodybuilding, you're trying to get your glutes ripped. You're really trying to get to this bizarre stage. So at that point, I was 8 weeks out from the show. I'm tracking everything I'm doing as usual. I used to have to starve myself to get lean, like 1,600 calories following the traditional approach. What I noticed right away when I took the 4 meals, same amount of food, and cut it to 2 meals, so I was doing a 16-8 approach, nothing crazy. My hunger was much easier to manage. So I noticed that right away. So that's how I came to discover fasting. Now, that was a very mild form of fasting. That summer, I was able to maintain my shape through the fasting, but that was the start of it. So I want to reframe your mind with some of this stuff tonight. You absorb what's useful for you. It doesn't matter if I'm telling you this stuff. If you don't connect the dots or it's not something you want to do, like for example, I have a one-on-one client I was working with tonight, and he wanted nutrition help. So I kind of sent him stuff over the weekend where it was let's just start spreading out the meals a little more. It wasn't full on fasting, wasn't any of this, but he said, you know, I'm not there yet. And that's great because with habit formation, you have to be the one that makes the choice. Freedom of choice is critical when you're trying to form a new habit. Can't be forced upon you. So food is a drug. Let's start there because once you understand this, you start to view it differently. Many of you are aware of this, but a drug is anything that affects the internal, biochemical, and hormonal environment of your body. The internal, biochemical, and hormonal environment of your body. Every time you eat, you change the chemistry of your body. So you start recognizing food is meant to be enjoyed, but it has a pronounced drug-like effect on the human body because it's a drug. Your body fat is food. So this is another thing you have to reframe. Most people that want my help with fasting, majority of them want to lose weight first and foremost. That's usually the stepping. Not everybody, and I'm going to go over some of the other benefits tonight. But once you understand that, you got to realize that the main reason, not the only reason, the main reason we have body fat is a backup fuel source. It's food. So if you just had 30 pounds of fat to lose, which is average, you know, you're not obese, but you got some fat to lose, that equates, because each pound of fat stores within it 3,500 calories of energy. So 30 pounds of fat equates to 105,000 calories that you've got to burn through to lose. That's a lot of food. That is a ton of food. You could literally go for months without eating and you'd be fine. So you got to recognize that body fat is food. And every time I'm going to give you a simple reframe that I learned when I first started competing because again, I would starve myself. When you feel hungry, if you're trying to lose weight and let's say your sleep is on point, you just have to reframe that as this is my body tapping into its own natural food source. This is what fat loss feels like. Okay, that's a key reframe in your head because most people, as soon as they feel a little bit of discomfort and hunger goes up a little bit, they'll eat, realizing that it's always going to set them back as far as their physique goals or weight loss goals. I want to give you a little analogy because I think your brain will connect the dots more when I teach like this. So if you have the fridge, let's say in your kitchen, right? Don't know where it is. If you have the fridge in your kitchen full of food, okay, let's say that's on the upstairs level. Now, you have a freezer in the basement that's also full of food. The freezer downstairs in your basement represents your body fat. The goal is, how do we get down there? What is the need for us to have to go down there and start taking that food out to use as energy? Now, first thing, fat loss is not simultaneous. What I mean by this, most people think if I cut calories here, exercise more, fat loss is going to happen. No, it's a sequential process. It's a sequence. We've got to empty the fridge upstairs. Okay? You do that through fasting. You empty that fridge out. So now you have a need to go downstairs to the basement, start taking that storage out. So the fridge upstairs, it's got to be emptied out. And I want you to think every time you open that fridge door, what happens? The light goes on. Every time that light goes on, I want you to, in your mind, picture that's a shot of insulin. That's an insulin burst. Now, insulin is a storage hormone. Every time you raise insulin, you signal the body to store. You will not lose weight if you're constantly triggering insulin. That's what we're trying to do with fasting, is we're trying to control insulin output. How often are we hitting insulin? So to get to the freezer in the basement, empty out that fridge. Don't open that door that often. Okay, run that fridge dry. Then you'll start having to go into the freezer in the basement, which represents your stored body fat. Cool things about fasting. So you have some health benefits. Again, so most people will come to me for weight loss. That is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, that's a result of what's going on internally. So you have autophagy. When you start crossing the depending what research you look at, the 24-hour mark of fasting, doing one meal a day, you start getting into 48s. Autophagy is when your body will literally go through and start eating itself. It'll eat damaged parts of cells that are no longer useful, that can mutate potentially into things like cancer and whatnot. Autophagy cannot happen in the presence of any calories. So most people are never getting any autophagy or cellular cleansing in their life, because most people, the longest they're going without eating is when they're sleeping. They might be going 6 to 8 to 10 hours. Most people, that's the max they're going without eating. They're never getting this autophagy. With fasting, you also greatly reduce inflammation. Inflammation is the root of all disease. Inflammation is very tied into insulin output. So we have insulin sensitivity. That's what we're trying to do through fasting. Get more insulin sensitive. Most people are insulin resistant, okay? They're eating too often, they're eating the wrong types of foods too often. The body has to continue to produce more insulin each time they eat. Now, insulin, let me go back to that because I want you to understand this. Insulin is a storage hormone. When you eat, insulin is output, and the signal is, let's clear all these nutrients, all this blood glucose, clear them out of the bloodstream and get them, store them to cells, get them to cells where they can be used as energy. So that's what insulin does, okay? When you have to chronically produce insulin because you're eating refined sugar and you're eating way too often, your body eventually reaches a point where it burns out. And now you become type 2 diabetic. And you've got to supplement with insulin. That doesn't solve the problem, that makes the problem worse. So I'm kind of going off on a tangent there, but insulin resistance is very tied into inflammation. You get more insulin sensitive, inflammation is going to go down. Okay. It's the second less spoken about road. So I want you to be very clear on knowing that traditional dieting, cutting calories, trying to control macronutrients is one metabolic pathway, metabolic road. Fasting is a completely different road, completely different road. Don't compare them. They're not the same thing. Now, when you do a traditional diet, a couple things happen metabolically. Your metabolism, your basal metabolic rate is going to lower. It's going to adjust down to match what you're putting in. That's why at first you'll do a diet, you'll lose, and oh shoot, stop working. Let me cut some more. Now there's only so much you can cut. When you're reliant on that external fuel source, food, as your main energy source, you're playing a losing game, because eventually you keep cutting, you keep cutting, you keep cutting. Metabolism keeps chasing it down. Metabolism can go up regulate or down regulate 40%. So that's something to keep in mind. Now you get to a point where you can't survive on any less external food, right? You're eating 1,000 calories, you're eating 1,200 calories a day, 1,500, whatever it is. At the same time, with the traditional diet, your main hunger hormone, ghrelin, is going to continue to rise. So metabolism is slowing down, ghrelin is going up. I don't care how disciplined you are, you're going to break eventually. Now you go back to eating even normal amounts of food, but you've altered your metabolism, which can take it could take years to recover that. So you've lowered your metabolism, hunger is through the roof, you're going to reset, you're going to wind up heavier than when you started. That's one metabolic pathway, that's traditional dieting, that's why it doesn't work. When I used to do nutrition seminars, I'd say, who's done a diet that's worked? Hands would go up. Okay, did you keep the weight off? All the hands would go down. It did not work. That's not what we're after. Anybody can get you to lose weight temporarily. So when you fast, what happens? Metabolism actually, and I'm talking about when you do longer form fasting, 20 hours plus, like one meal a day is the base. Metabolism will actually go up, okay, by 5 to 14%. And that has to do with the rise in growth hormone, cortisol, and adrenaline. The mitochondria will actually produce more energy on its own. So metabolism will actually go up 5 to 14% when you're doing this consistently. And your main hunger hormone goes down over time, not up. So it has the exact opposite effect as traditional dieting, okay? With those hormones I just mentioned, growth hormone, cortisol, adrenaline, you're going to be more productive. You're going to have more energy, not less. Most people, the big fear they have with fasting, and why I like to start people out with the 48-hour fast, is to knock the fear right out of the park. Show yourself that nothing bad is going to happen when you do a longer fast. And now all of a sudden you transition back to 1 meal a day. It's not that hard. Everything I teach within the Panda program has to do with the way the brain works and mind map. Information is not the problem, right? I have to get you to connect the dots, and you got to realize that mind map is the science of how habits are formed. This is all about you creating a habit, and a habit frees up a lot of brain space, head space. Once you have a habit, you go on autopilot. You don't have to think about it. Now, with habits in the human brain, anything that is willpower based, your brain will not form a habit around. You have to use a little bit of willpower at first, but when it's massive amounts of willpower, like a traditional diet, and your thought is, man, I can't wait for this crap to be over with, that's willpower based. Your brain is only going to form a habit around something it finds pleasure in. Remember that. It's only going to form a habit around something it finds pleasure in. When you got to use a lot of willpower for something, you are not finding that experience enjoyable. It's anti-habituation, anti-habit forming. So remember that. Some myths, right? Let me start with starvation mode. So a lot of people say, well, you're going to go into starvation mode. I have people reach out to me all the time. So-and-so, this doctor told me I can't fast. I'm going to go into starvation mode. What they are referring to is the exact thing that happens when you do a traditional diet. That's how you go. If there's anything that is starvation mode, that's how you put yourself into it. When you rely on the brilliance of the human body and allow it to go extended periods without eating, as I said, metabolism goes up, hunger hormones go down, all your hormones improve. It's the exact opposite of starvation mode. So people that tell you that don't understand it. Now, the people that tell you, and I like to call them the fake fitness experts, that fasting doesn't work, blah, 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 I guarantee you they've never done any longer form fasting. Guaranteed. You got to understand that most people take nutrition as a religion. Whatever they believe, they're all in. They go all in. Where I've tried everything, and I just keep the empty cup philosophy, right? You keep emptying out, see what actually works. Let your biases go, see what actually works. So protein, you do not need as much. That's a big concern I get. How am I going to get all my protein in? With everything in nutrition, you got to chase the dollar. Where is the messaging coming from? If you go to the grocery store and let's say you're going to buy potatoes, you're going to buy some kind of animal meat, or you're going to buy butter, which one is the most expensive? Okay. It's by far the animal protein. It's not even close. So my point being is you always chase the dollar. Who's putting out the messaging? Protein, the main job of protein as we know it is to help us rebuild. Now, when you have your protein sparing macronutrients, your fats and your carbs, you don't need that much protein. Protein is not meant to be a main energy source. It is not meant to be, when these people go on these low carb diets or keto, which people bastardize, I don't even know how to do it because low carb and keto is not necessarily the same thing. But anyway, the point being, protein is an amino acid. I want you to think of the word acid. It's very acidic. You don't need that much. If you have a more acidic body, it's going to lead to more inflammation. Okay, and there's plenty of studies I have in one of my other presentations where when they look at complex carbs, stuff that grew from the earth, the insulin output from them versus the insulin output from animal meat, the insulin output from animal meat is much greater. So the reason they tell you to avoid potatoes, avoid these things, avoid fruit is because insulin, they don't understand how the body works. They don't understand this stuff. So you don't need as much protein as you've been told. I love meat. That's how I grew up. My bodybuilding background, I would be eating 350, 400 grams of protein a day. So again, go back to habit formation. I'm not telling you to become a vegan or vegetarian. Just be mindful of it. You cut down on it. And if you're doing longer form fasting, that happens naturally. Frequency of eating. So this is a big thing. When you've done a traditional thing and you're eating 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, there's something called food entrainment. When your body is expected food to come in. When it expects food to come in, like when you first start this longer form fasting, those times, let's say it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're going to get hunger signals. The hunger hormones are going to release because it's entrainment. It's a pattern that it's like Pavlov's cause and effect, right? So a lot of people equate that when they start eating like 5 small meals a day and they're getting hungry those 5 times a day with an increased metabolism. It's not. It's just food entrainment. The less frequent you eat, the better off you are. Breakfast, I've got a whole part in the book about that. Again, trace the dollars. Breakfast is, as we know, it's everybody breaks their fast, but I'm talking about a morning breakfast that's a multi-billion-dollar industry is not a natural thing to do. When you wake up, you want cortisol to continue to rise. That's what's actually going to wake you up naturally in the morning. As soon as you eat, insulin's going to go up. They have an inverse relationship. Okay, if insulin goes up, cortisol comes back down. Guess what? You just shut fat loss off for the day. Breakfast is not the most important meal of the day when you're talking about traditional breakfast. Most people eat breakfast, they get hungry and tired shortly thereafter. All the years I've been doing this, when I say, are you actually hungry at breakfast? When I start breaking down what people are doing, 95% of them, no, I just do it because I was told I should eat it. You know, it's going to kickstart my metabolism. Your metabolism doesn't need to be kickstarted. You got to ask yourself, what can you commit to doing with this, right? Eating 2 meals a day is better than eating 3 meals a day. If you want to do 1 meal a day, but if you're interested in fasting, you have to decide, what can I start with? Because it's all based in the premise of the mind map, where we're after a transformation, which is when a change becomes permanent. We're not after a short-term change that we're going to grunt through. We want slow changes over a long period of time. We don't want to go very intense for a short period of time. So what can you commit to doing? And that's the question you got to ask yourself. To recap, okay, and you can go, there's so many different areas we can go with fasting, guys, but I wanted to give an intro with this stuff tonight. Fat is food. Your body fat is food. Remember that. Food is a drug. Okay, so if you look at stress eating, any habit, so if you remember these 3 things about a habit, you have the trigger. Okay, that's always the process, the trigger. And the brain is a pattern recognition machine. If you realize the patterns, you can start changing your habits. You have the trigger, then you have the habit. So let's say that's stress eating, and the reward. The key when you're trying to change habits is realize the trigger, realize the reward. What are you getting out of that? And how can we replace the habit to give you the same reward? What else can we put in there that's going to give you the same reward? So stress eating, really, it's about getting this big hit of serotonin, right? These feel-good hormones that's going to temporarily relieve your stress, but guess what? It doesn't last long. And then you got to go back to the well and do it again. And then you get into this vicious cycle. You start feeling you have no control. That's not where we want to be. If we realize the brain's a pattern recognition machine, prediction and response, you always want to try to maintain control. Metabolism is misunderstood. People are going to tell you how to raise metabolism, even though you get a bump from it from fasting. My point with telling you that is that your metabolism does not slow down with fasting. You don't have to dramatically boost your metabolism. Your metabolism is pretty much set. Even if you gain muscle, it's not going up that much. Okay, so you got to remember that. But you can damage it through improper dieting, and it can take a long time to recover from. You see this with a lot of women. This happened to me with all the years I competed. Devin would always ask me, I don't understand. You eat so well, you work out. Why aren't you leaner? So I don't understand either, because I would control my calories and all this, but unless I was eating in that 1,600 calorie range, I couldn't get lean like you would expect. What I teach with the fasting, again, it's based on mind mapping, but it's something you can do forever. That's the big differentiator between this and a diet. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do 1 meal a day every day. Go back to that question. What can you commit to doing? Maybe you're start with 1 meal a day once a week. Maybe you're doing the black version of the Panda, which is a 48-hour fast, followed by 1 meal a day and 1 off day every week. I'm a big believer in having a cheat day, quote unquote, and I'll do a whole presentation on cheat days maybe in February. But when you have a break and it's a planned break, you're in control. You're not binging. You plan this out. It's a reward. We're looking for long-term adherence, but something that you can do forever, and it's going to continue to serve your body. There's so many positive effects it has on the brain, on your hormones, on reduced inflammation. The list goes on. If you could package what longer form fasting could do to you in a pill, you'd be a billionaire by selling that pill. Okay. And just look at what the majority of people are doing. Just had this conversation before I got on this with my buddy who's a coach. If you don't know what to do in life, just look at what the majority of people are doing and do the opposite. You're going to be right on the path. You're going to be right on almost every single time. That could do relationships, finances, nutrition, all this stuff. Look at what the majority are doing and go the other way. And that's pretty much what I teach with the fasting. So I'll take questions in a second. If you don't already have our fasting manual, it's free download. You can get it at that website. Okay. It's about a 10 to 12 page. That's where shoot me a message if you do have questions that come up that you're not, that's not coming to mind right now. So let me stop my screen share, see if there's any questions. If you have a question, you can unmute yourself. I'm just going to check Facebook too and see if we got any questions over there. Do we have any questions, guys? If you do, you can either type them in or unmute yourself, and we'll be glad to answer those.
Hey, Kyle,
What
about fasting? What about fasting with like teens or young adults? What are your thoughts on that?
Great question. I think it's great for them. It's great for them. And if you look at teens, and you look at kids, they're much more in tune with their hunger signals. Now, teens have, so a lot of this ties into what's called a circadian rhythm. Teen circadian rhythm is pushed back a couple hours, and that has to do with breaking off from the pack and the tribe and becoming independent. So their meal times might be different than ours. We don't want to force them to eat when we eat, but it's great for brain function. And the younger they can get into this, the better. So we look at like Braxton, Braxton, he's 5. He's our oldest child, but we let him kind of dictate what time. We don't make him eat right when he gets up. He usually wants to eat around 10:30, right? And if he's not hungry for lunch, we don't make him eat it. But we're not letting him snack throughout the day. Yeah, if we're on vacation or his cousins are over, that's different. But in a regular routine, we let him, and then dinner time is the main meal. But I think it's great for them, Anya, and it builds great discipline. And if we have a teen and they start getting insulin resistant, start putting on, they can't get the fat off, they're setting themselves up for a very difficult life as far as getting that weight off permanently. So the sooner we can get that in control, the better. And for school performance, fasting is the best.
Thanks, Kyle.
Welcome. When breaking a fast, should we start eating as our units? What does that mean, James?
Sorry, it's James and Sandy. The dog pressed enter.
Oh.
He's asking about broth. Should that be one of the first things that we have after fast?
Okay, gotcha. So when you guys are breaking a fast, I'll tell you exactly what I like to do. The chicken broth, the bone broth is a great thing to do. Okay, it's very soothing. It's very soothing on the digestive system. It's a great way to kind of break in. So when you first start, if you're first starting to do longer fasts, you might notice when you break the fast, you might have to run to the bathroom. You might get the runs. Totally normal. Okay, this is totally normal. And maybe I'll touch on the juice a little bit too and the effect that has with it. But a very simple way is the broth. I like doing, I'm very big on the micronutrients, like what is your body getting from the food that you're eating? So I'll do 4 ounces of cranberry juice, like pure cranberry juice, because it's loaded with iodine, which is great for the immune system. It's very bitter, but I like to do that. And then I go right into my fruit. So I like to start the meal with fruit. That's a key element. Now, a lot of people will eat fruit on the backside of the meal. So let me explain that. Fruit is digested further down in the small intestine. Okay. So we want to get that through the system before we start piling other food in there. So most people eat a main meal, then eat fruit. Now, what happens with the fruit, a lot of times it could ferment right there because it's not getting to the part of the GI tract where it's mainly digested. Another thing with fruit, when food passes through your stomach, right? Because a lot of people say, "Oh, if I do this, I'm not going to be able. I'm going to eat too much. I'm not." If you follow this system, this works brilliantly. When fruit passes through your stomach, it hits the stretch receptors. When your stomach expands, and even though fruit is very voluminous, doesn't have a lot of calories if we look at energy, but it hits the stretch receptors, right? It has a lot of water, a lot of volume. That already starts signaling your brain that put the brakes on. We don't need to eat that fast or eat that much, right? And you're getting these micronutrients in there. And fruit is great for your thyroid and metabolism as well. So I like to go with fruit. Then I go into my main meal. If we're not doing, so Wednesday night's our Mexican night, but a typical Tuesday, like Devin's making elk tomorrow. Somebody gave us elk. So I'll do that. But if it wasn't the animal meat tomorrow night, I would have my potatoes, and I'll do 2 or 3 potatoes, whether that's big russet potatoes or sweet potatoes. I'll do that with broccoli. The broccoli, I'll use like a hummus, I buy from Costco. Use the hummus, make it tasty. Put butter and salt on the potatoes. And then my dessert during the week is I have soaked oats. I have salt in there, stevia, cinnamon. I put a couple frozen blueberries, some peanut butter, some nuts. That's my dessert. Now, potatoes, let me touch base on that. It's the most satiating. When they look at food satiation factors, the most satiating food, not even close, no animal protein, nothing, is potatoes. What's going to keep you full the longest. It's a tuber. It takes a long time to break down in the gut. Potatoes are excellent for you. So don't let the fear mongers that try to tell you got to be scared of carbs, don't listen to them. So that's the structure I use for the meal. Can you speak to fasting and what we can drink? Okay, I hear mixed things. I've been drinking black coffee, water, but I love organic ginger leaf tea. Is this okay? Yes, that is perfectly okay, Melissa. How about a lemon ginger tea? Perfectly okay. Yeah, totally fine. So the main thing is we want to try to stay away from calories. Now, I do have people that go through the Panda program, and if it's a make or break between going most of the day without eating or putting a splash of cream in their coffee, after the first couple of weeks, I say, okay, go to it, because I'd rather you get the bulk of this than throw in the towel because you're resenting that you can't have a splash of cream in your coffee. So that's one aside. Now, a key thing that you got to drink when you are fasting, this is critical, and some people don't like it, but you got to do it, is what we call the juice. It's the salts that you're putting in your water. So and I'll tell you the formula in a second. But if you're going, okay, there you go. You tried the juice. If you're going long periods of time, and for most people, like, okay, 1 meal a day, and your energy is crashing, first thing I look at is sleep. Okay. You can't sidestep sleep. Sleep is the king. Okay. Sleep is the king. It's the best diet in the world. Get that first and foremost. And that's a whole nother presentation. But if sleep's on point and your energy is crashing, performance is going down, it has nothing to do with the food that's coming in. It has to do with you're probably already pretty low in your sodium and your electrolytes. And now the food that you were getting that from, if you were salting your foods, now you're not putting that in. Your body, the number one supplement for the body, and I call it a supplement, is sodium, sea salt. Okay. Every cell in your body has a sodium potassium pump. Every single cell. That makes up the biggest part of your metabolism. If you're deficient, and even if you weren't fasting, I would have you do this. If you're deficient in sodium, metabolism is going to be sluggish and energy is going to be lower than it should. When you add this stuff into your water, you can fast for days just on this stuff. You don't need nothing else. So the formula that I like to use is 32 to 40 ounces of water. And with that, a quarter to a half a teaspoon of sea salt, colored sea salt, something called low salt or new salt, which you can buy at the store. You can get it on Amazon. It's basically potassium. Okay, so those are your two main electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and baking soda. Baking soda is a form of sodium, sodium bicarbonate. It's very good for making the body more alkaline. It's very good for cleansing out your kidneys and making the kidneys function better. To those three things. And I like to do 2 servings a day. I know in the winter, your thirst mechanism will probably go down, but that's, I like to get 64 to 80 ounces of that a day. Okay, do we have any other questions? Let me check over here. Good.
Hey Kyle,
Yeah.
what about like supplements? Doing like almost like a weight gainer kind of protein with 700 calories or something like that. As you come off your fast, I guess.
So Dennis, what I always go back to the first question, and it's going to be individual for everybody. What's the goal? What's your goal?
I mean, for me, I'm fairly lean, so I don't want to lose too much. So it's not really weight loss.
Okay.
It's to keep performance up, I guess, and strength up. So my fear is losing strength.
Losing strength. So let me touch base on some of the hormones. I'll dive a little deeper into that, and then we'll talk about potentially supplementing with. First, I'm not a big fan of whey protein. It's garbage. I used to recommend it to people, but actually, so let me tell you one quick story about that. Just at jiu-jitsu last week, one of the guys, a lot of the guys are into lifting. They'll ask me questions. Said, "Man, I have whey protein." And he goes, "It just rips me apart, runs right through me. What do you recommend?" I said, well, first of all, you shouldn't be having whey protein. If you're going to have it, it should be cold filtered. So whey protein, just like pasteurized dairy, the pasteurization process, the protein molecule is destroyed. So it's actually like poison for your body. Your body doesn't recognize it. Most people have issues, especially with lower quality whey protein. And whey is what's left over after they pasteurize the regular milk. And regular milk's not good for you. So that's first, right? So if you're going to do a shake, I would make it with like almond milk, fruit, peanut butter, something to get the calories in, okay, if that's the concern. Now, if you look at what happens with hormones, with fasting, even when you don't strength train and they do 72-hour fast, when I look at this, it's very muscle preserving, right? So even if you take the stimulus of strength training away, there's that research. Growth hormone, when you start getting into the longer fasts, goes up 2,000 to 3,000%. So growth hormone is very muscle preserving and very fat mobilizing. So you have that. Luteinizing hormone goes up when you start getting into the 1 meal a day and beyond. If you do a 48 every week, luteinizing hormone is a precursor for testosterone, which is a main anabolic hormone in the body. It's more dominant in men than women. So we optimize all these hormones. And Dennis, as long as I know you're training with Brandon, as long as your strength training is on point, that's the main stimulus to build. Okay, that's the main stimulus to build muscle or to maintain it. So as long as your strength training is on point, and you've already built the foundation, you don't have to worry about losing. You're not going to lose. I mean, you could go longer periods of time and really crank it up if you want to lose. But if you're going to do a shake, getting back to that question, I would like it to be stuff that grew from the earth, that came from the earth, if you can. Now, if you really had to gain, like I have one of the clients I had tonight, younger guy, 21, he's trying to break the 130 barrier. So for him, his mass shake that I have him make is almond milk, it's bananas, it's ice cream. So stuff I wouldn't normally recommend, but we got to get the calories in with him. So even with that though, the main stimulus for building muscle is the strength training. Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome, buddy. So what do we got? Okay. During a fast and your energy feels depleted before a time when you will use energy such as your jiu-jitsu class, would you use the juice? Yes, that's good question, Steve. I wake up, so we actually made juice pills. Me and my brothers would Newell strength supplements. So I wake up, I take that with something called Java Stem. So right away, I'm getting in extra electrolytes. I'll do sea salt just out of the spoon as well to get extra in. Okay. And it's sodium, guys. When they look at this, sodium can increase strength endurance by 20%. It's off the charts what this can do for your performance. And a lot of the pro sports teams are actually monitoring their athletes now, different electrodes and whatnot, and monitoring how much are they losing in training camp when it's hot out in the summer season. And they're making sure that these players put that back in before they leave the facility. It's that important. So energy, though, I always like to look at sleep first, all right? Because a lot of times I find people aren't getting quality sleep or enough sleep, and they're trying to short circuit it, and that's really the root of the issue. So like Steve with fasting, so Tuesdays is always the back end of my 48, and I go to jiu-jitsu Tuesdays. I eat Tuesday, and performance is totally fine. You do it. Sometimes Mondays I'll work out. Tuesdays I might work and then do that, and performance is fine. So definitely supplement with the juice. It's going to help your performance no matter what. So let's see what we got here. Working out. If I continue to work out in the early AM while fasting, I prefer morning workouts. If I work out during the fast, would you increase the amount of juice? You can increase the amount of juice. You got to do it slowly. So if you do too much juice, what you're going to find, it's not that it's bad. You're just going to get diarrhea, right? And that'll go away over time. So water follows sodium. So if we're inputting more sodium than we're used to, there's an adjustment period. But the salts actually help break up fecal matter that's been stuck inside your intestines. So literally shit that's still inside of us, right? So that's a good thing. So over time, what you'll notice is that ability, that urge to have to run to the bathroom when you're drinking the juice will go away. That could take a long time, but it will go away. But I'm definitely a big fan of working out in the morning. You can just hit the quarter or a half teaspoon dry salt if you want, like if you're working out and you don't have time to drink 40 ounces before that. But I like to drink it throughout, but that's a good question. You'll notice when you don't have enough sodium in your body because performance is going to go down. There's no two ways about it. There's a great book on that called The Salt Fix. The oldest doctor studies is salt and sodium. Let's see if we got any questions. Do we have any other questions, guys? When will we bottle the juice? So, Bill, we actually have it in supplement form at the gym now. It's pills, capsules. I think that's what you're talking about. Any other questions? So like I said, guys, I'm going to be doing a big monthly webinar on various topics. So keep an eye out for that. I'll be doing mini lessons like this. So I love teaching, and it's something I wanted to do in the new year. If you have questions, shoot them to me. If you found this helpful, just hit the like button and maybe share it on your page. That'll help me out. And if there's no other questions, I appreciate you guys tuning in on a Monday night. And thank you for the support. You all have a good night.